Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I'm Aniel Tamirano, teacher trainer. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Empowering Teachers Worldwide. In this new video, in the first video of this series, Assessment for Learning, the Road to Improvement, I would like to introduce the concept of assessment for learning. You're familiar with this situation, I'm sure. Check here. A group of students is listening to a teacher who is explaining the lesson. Then the teacher starts thinking, okay, I'm teaching this lesson, but are my students learning? And this is a big question for us. Is our teaching leading to learning? And we do have a tool to help us answer this question. And this tool is assessment. Now, anytime we assess our students, we either assess in a formative or in a summative way. Now, assessment of learning is summative. And the preposition here is important. Assessment of learning. It's summative in nature. And it usually happens at the end of an extended period of teaching, like at the end of a unit of work, at the end of a lesson, an academic year, a term. And the aim is determining who has mastered the content and to what extent. Now, assessment for learning or formative assessment is different because the purpose is not to determine who succeeded and who didn't, but to provide guidance to the student through specific descriptive feedback. Assessment for learning emphasizes learning rather than grading. Students don't receive a grade, they receive feedback that helps them to improve. Therefore, what makes assessment formative is what the teacher does with the information it generates. When you use formative assessment, you identify the present status of a student in terms of the learning standard, you diagnose what to do to assist them, you provide feedback, and you allow the students to make the changes. So assessment for learning helps students to understand the reason and the focus for learning, ask important questions to support their learning, construct meaning, use feedback to plan steps in learning, and select or adjust strategies to make adjustments or to achieve goals. It also helps them recognize success in learning and identify and work towards a goal. And also, it helps them make connections among ideas to extend their learning. And also, they helps them invest more fully in their own learning. Now, there are some principles on which assessment for learning is based. And these were compiled by the Assessment for Learning Reform Group. And there are 10 principles on which assessment for learning is based. Assessment for learning should be part of effective planning. That is, our planning should provide opportunities for both the learner and the teacher to obtain information and use it to progress towards learning goals. And it also has to be flexible to respond to initial and emerging ideas and skills. It should also focus on how students learn. That is, the process of learning has to be in the minds of both the teacher and the learner. And that is, we have to bear this in mind, not just when we are planning the lesson, but also when the evidence of learning is interpreted. Learners should also be aware of the how of their learning, as well as of the what they are learning. Assessment for learning should be central to classroom practice, should be a central feature. Much of what we do and what students do in the classroom can be described as assessment. That is, tasks and questions from learners to demonstrate learning, understanding, skills. So it should be central to classroom practice. It should also be a key professional skill. I have noticed over the years that assessment for learning or formative assessment is not included and hasn't been included in teacher training programs. Therefore, we need to, of course, integrate this as a key professional skill. Also, it should be sensitive. It should be a sensitive and constructive process. Teachers should be aware of the impact that comments, grading, marks can have on students' confidence and should be as constructive as possible in their feedback. We should also never underestimate the importance of student motivation. Assessment that encourages learning fosters motivation by emphasizing progress and achievement rather than failure. Comparison with other students who have been more successful is very unlikely to motivate learners. It should also promote understanding of goals and criteria, the criteria by which the learning goals are assessed. Now, for effective learning to take place, learners need to understand what it is that they are trying to achieve and want to achieve it. Communicating assessment criteria involves discussing these criteria with them, using language that they can understand, and providing examples of how the criteria can be met in practice. It should also give guidance on how to improve learning. That is, we should ensure that learners receive constructive guidance on how to improve. It should also develop the learner's capacity for self-assessment. Teachers should pinpoint the learner's strengths and advise on how to develop these strengths. We should also be clear and constructive about any weaknesses and how these might be addressed. And of course, provide opportunities for learners to improve their work. And finally, we need to help them recognize the full range of educational achievement. That is, we should equip learners with the desire and the capacity to take charge of their learning through developing the skills of self-assessment, which is also a very important life skill. Now, these principles are useful as they clearly show how assessment for learning fits into our teaching practice, be it planning learning criteria or guiding learning. Now, let's see how this fits into the classroom. Now, assessment for learning focuses on both, we have said, the teacher and the student. And we need to focus on us and them understanding three key things. Where the learner is going, that is, sharing the aims of a lesson and success criteria, helps teachers to gauge what individual students and groups have learned during a lesson. It will help us generate evidence of learning that we can both, teacher and students, can make use of. Also, assessment for learning should focus on where the learner is now. That is, techniques, for example, effective questioning will help us gauge what they have learned during a lesson. And also, how can the learner get there? We can use this evidence of learning to inform choices about what they will do next with a class, with individual students, and learners can use this evidence to make decisions about their learning. Now, one of the most pertinent findings from research and past practice is that assessment for learning is a continual cycle. It begins, as we can see here, with a thorough planning for effective and interesting lessons, having clear learning intentions or objectives. You can call them learning intentions, learning aims, learning objectives, to direct our students in their learning and provide suitable input and learning activities. Now, Planning, planning is critical, and we must consider framing learning intentions which declare learning rather than the activity the students are about to engage with. You will also see that there is an improvement stage, which follows self-evaluation and feedback. This is also an important part of assessment for learning. Once feedback is offered, pupils are provided with the opportunity to read, process, and respond to improvement prompts made in their feedback. So they carry out these improvements to the work in question and not to future work. Now, when we integrate assessment for learning into our classroom practice, it's advisable to take one area at a time and allow for its development rather than rush into a succession of rapid changes. Because otherwise we're going to be rather overwhelmed by the whole process, and we are quite likely to forget about that. Also, do not underestimate the time, the effort, and the planning required to effect real improvements. It's not something that happens from one day to the other. Engaging with these strategies at a superficial level is not enough. It takes time to understand the rationale underpinning each element and to make sense of it in your own classroom context. So, we will be looking at these and other things in the next few videos. So remember that you can always contact me. You can send me an email. You can follow me on my blog or on LinkedIn, and you can always subscribe to this YouTube channel for more videos like this. So this is it for today. Until the next one. See you soon. Bye.